Hi, John Techies. Did you know that you could apply for a research grant of up to $200,000 non-dilutive from the A2 Collective Awards program? I'm Karen Etkin, and my guest today at the AgeTech podcast is Stephen Liu, the co-founder and managing director of the AI/Tech plus Aging A2 Collective program. I spoke to Stephen about what exactly are they looking for, what the application process looks like, and who are the leading research universities in the United States that you can pilot your product with. Applications are open until August 15, and the good news is that the first step of the application is only a couple of pages long. Before we begin, make sure you hit the subscribe as well as the bell button so you can get a notification whenever new content is available. Welcome, Stephen.
Hi, Karen. Nice to meet you.
Nice.
I've read your book and it's awesome.
Thank you. It's nice to have you here. Stephen, I'm sure everyone is incredibly curious to know what exactly is the AI Tech plus Aging A2 Collective and what is this award that people can apply to?
Well, the A2 Collective stands for the AI Tech and Aging Collective, and we represent essentially the National Institute on Aging's artificial intelligence technology collaboratories for research and aging program, aging research. It's called AITC. You know, the NIH and the government loves to have their acronyms and be as descriptive as possible because there's so many different programs, but we simplified it to just the A2 Collective. And you know, the overall mission of the program is to empower innovation and AI and aging. And we're really dedicated to helping Americans live longer, healthier lives through the application of artificial intelligence and emerging technology. And the A2 Collective hosts the A2 Pilot Awards, which is on an annual basis. We're having our second installment right now. Applications are due August 15th. And essentially, the AITC program has earmarked about $40 million over the next 5 years to fund these technology-based pilot demonstration projects. So, and these are kind of, you might say, pre-seed types of technologies. They have a prototype, it's kind of ready to go, it's ready to test. We're not talking about a big study, but we're looking for things that are going to move the needle in the next, 2 to 5 years, not just purely academic research projects, but that's also a valid purpose. We have a very broad mandate. So anyway, so the A2 Collective, we have the A2 Pilot Awards, which is on an annual basis, and the A2 Collective is made up of course, the NIA. There are 3 research collaboratories housed out of Johns Hopkins University of Pennsylvania and the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. And of University of Massachusetts at Amherst, it's actually a collection of 5 entities there. But essentially, there's 3 research collaboratories and also a coordinating center run by Rosalie Associates. And so that makes up the A2 Collective. We host the A2 Pilot Awards, and we're very excited to kind of help the industry along, to do our part to inspire innovation using AI technology in aging and especially also Alzheimer's disease and related dementias.
Brilliant. So, what was the origin of this award? What made the NIA decide to run a program specifically for AI in aging?
Well, I think this is a vision of NIA and specifically Partha and Marcel. And I think of this as their moonshot, and the model was Y Combinator, was kind of an inspirational point. How can we use some of these Y Combinator types of the ethos, I guess, and infuse that in the NIA? And so we're probably going to fund over the next 5 years, because each project, 40 million total for pilot projects, about 8 million per year, average pilot project, 150,000 or so. So we could be funding, potentially 200 pilot projects over 5 years. So from there, if we have an eye towards, commercialization and a translational impact in the next two, as we're selecting them, that's something that could hopefully have a positive impact on the status of, aging and dementia research in the US. And that's what we hope to do, is make that impact with this program. And so that's kind of the origin story of how this program, from as told to me by the program officer. It's really quite an inspiring thing. That's kind of what I was so attracted to, I guess, join this A2 collective. My origin story is that I partnered up with Dr. Rose Lee, who is a former NIA branch chief. And she had told me about this, RFP for a coordinating center. And so I partnered with her and Rose Lee Associates, which is a very established firm, does a lot of great work related to coordination, meetings, program management, largely related to NIH and NIA and health related things. And I helped her on the kind of Silicon Valley portion of the grant proposal, and I was pleased that we got the grant. It's really exciting. It's really inspiring. You have two areas that are mega trends over the next 10, 20 years. You have, number one hand, technology, and especially artificial intelligence and machine learning, which is going to dominate every aspect of our life. But then you have, obviously, aging and dementia, Alzheimer's disease, which are two of the biggest, both issues, but also market opportunities in the next 10 years, as your book kind of details out. And so I thought, wow, this is a good thing to invest in for the next so many years and ingratiate myself in the industry. Everybody's been so welcoming like yourself and people like Mary Furlong and Steve Ewell, and I guess all these people, and it's been great to work with everybody. For myself, I come from more of the Silicon Valley world, and as I look at this, there is a shortage of AI engineers that can really do serious research work globally. They're all being hired by Baidu and Google and Amazon. They're probably funding research fellowships. And then the other portion of the guys are our best and brightest are focusing on delivering TikTok videos. And so I don't think they realize how big of a market opportunity, how big of an impact they can make on our US healthcare system, kind of from a social impact level. And so that's kind of my personal agenda, is to get some of these people in venture and tech to allocate and take more bets in aging and Alzheimer's disease, because in the next 10 years, it's going to be a big problem and it's going to be a great market opportunity.
Absolutely. There's definitely a shortage of AI engineers.
Oh, I should clarify that we perfectly called it AI and tech, AI/tech, because your project doesn't have to have AI yet. Probably machine learning, or it doesn't necessarily even need that. It could be emerging tech as well too. So there's a purposely broad mandate for this program. I think we're letting 1,000 flowers bloom. We don't want to close off anything in terms of the type of pilot projects that we will sponsor.
Interesting. So let's dive into that. So what would be the ideal candidate for this program?
That's a great question. So we had our very first pilot awards, if you recall, just 6 months ago. And we're still digesting that. We have, I think, 20 to 25 conditional awardees that have not been announced yet. We kind of caught different cycle, and so we hope to announce that probably in September, October. And for this year, for this August pilot awards, this is for funding by spring of 2023. So it won't take as long as we did for the first one. And so what I can say about some of the projects that were funded, we had a lot, from what I could see, there was a lot in the typical areas of physical frailty and cognitive decline, social isolation, multimorbidity. Then we had something related to delirium. and cataracts. Medication management is an area. A lot of them were using off-the-shelf sensor technologies, some mature technologies. There was thermal imaging for passive monitoring. Obviously, there's lots of AI algorithms driven types of technologies. And I would say that among the split, this particular program, there's actually two separate buckets. So each of the three collaboratories have one bucket, but it's actually split between healthy aging and ADRD. And so once you're either in one of those two buckets, sometimes there's hybrid, but usually there's a choice there. And among the awardees, I'd say about 60% had something to do with ADRD, actually. So we actually had quite a bit of Alzheimer's and dementia related. And there's also more money attributed towards Alzheimer's as well, too. And then about 36% was purely healthy aging. So that can give you a little sense of that. But that's not to say that these categories will be this split next year. It really depends on what the research collaboratories, the AITCs get in. And I'm sure they'll just pick the strongest teams and pilot project proposals.
So what is the selection process like?
Well, it's an application process. And so in this second year, which is due August 15th, it's actually a two-step process. So what's due on August 15th is what we call a round one prelim application. It's essentially, for academic speak, an LOI. I think the actual application format is about 2 pages, along with some other supporting materials. And so you'll have to declare a budget number that you're requesting. Obviously, you have to have a topic, and you want to cover kind of the scientific merit, a light project plan, who's involved, what's the problem, how big of a problem is there any commercial or translational or clinical impact. And so from there, we'll make a decision in September, and then by October, we'll invite from that pool of round one for round two, who will submit a full application that will be much more involved, that will include a full budget with budget justification and a variety of other areas. And of course, there'll be some interviews, in between that as well, too. So generally, we have both academics and startups applying, some even larger companies applying. And so, yeah, everybody goes through the same process. They are reviewed. They have to choose one of 3 research collaboratories, Johns Hopkins, Penn, or Mass. And then that collaboratory will assign a multidisciplinary team to review it. They generally go by the NIH score. So I always tell at least the startups, a component of this is scientific merit. Is the outcome that you're researching for your pilot project, is that going to advance the science? Can you contextualize it with the prior research? Is the actual pilot project plan, does it have scientific rigor? And then, of course, there's the commercial, translational, clinical need, putting in context there, and the team as well, too.
Got it. So it's basically a startup or a researcher. It could also be an academic that has any type of technology. Doesn't necessarily have to be fancy AI.
It could be generating a data set, as an example. And obviously, it's all about data these days. So, without labeled data, then, I think everyone would like to acquire access to labeled data so they can do other research. We're not asking, oh, by the way, I should mention that we're not asking any of the pilot project awardees to share any IP per se, or there's no initial IP, though it may differ based upon the university and what resources you use with each collaboratory, but you should talk to them about that. And also, it's zero equity, it's non-dilutive in terms of the funding. There may be a data sharing arrangement, such as anonymized labeled data from the research. And then, each research collaboratory has a wealth of, these are the leading experts in their field, from medicine to geriatrics to computer science. So there's a huge benefit to working with these research collaboratories, and they don't want to just write a check. They want to help these pilot projects. They want to advance, and I want to help. I want these pilot projects to become a startup and then eventually raise funding and have it go into pairs like Humana, down the road. So we'd like to see this deployed in the next couple of years, some of these seedlings, I guess. And so that part is exciting.
It is exciting, generating new scientific knowledge that could potentially tackle some of the challenges of aging and really, like you said, move the needle. So startups can get up to $200,000 of non-dilutive funding. Is that right?
Yes, and that's not including, that's direct cost. And I would advise that if they look to apply, you always want to over ask, I guess, but don't over ask too much, because when you get to the application process for the NIA, you're gonna have to justify every line items. And a lot of these research collaborators actually know how much things cost. But then again, if you're a funded startup, maybe you could subsidize the cost as well too. I think the association is more important because you're having your technology being validated by the leading researchers in this field. And I think that goes a long way, because eventually all health tech type of tech and med tech type of technologies have to go through a rigorous validation process called the FDA, or so their clinical trials, all that type of stuff. So I think it's good to it's a good thing to involve. I mean, my pitch to health tech and med tech there's actually quite a few health tech, med tech startups that are well funded, that have mature technology and IP. And I'm talking to a number of them right now that are interested in this program, because they may be working on other areas, pediatrics or something, but they could just simply do an application towards aging or dementia. And so they could retrofit so I'm talking to one particular startup that has a pediatric wearable device and now is looking to do an aging or dementia type of application. So I think there's a lot of examples like that. They don't necessarily have to be brand new technology, but generally, and there's also a lot of academics that are doing great work in other areas, not necessarily related to aging and dementia, that it may actually apply to aging. One particular one that I talked to was wanting to do user experience, and he actually came from the toddler space, user experience, but actually there's some similarities there, being the best guy geek squad for my parents on setting up all their iPads. A lot of the existing technologies right now and apps and devices is covered in your book, are not geared for senior citizens. There's not enough research. They just assume that you know how to do it. I'm constantly being called to my parents' house every day because our iPad is on the fritz, or they didn't sync this or that. So it's quite intimidating.
So from the time during spring 2023 that grantees are awarded their grant, how much time is there to run a pilot, write a paper, publish it? What's the process like from there?
Well, I don't know if you need to write a paper, but I think we do hope a paper comes out of it. Generally there's probably going to be an academic involved, at least quoting the existing research or contextualizing everything. But that's a very good question, because these are meant to be fairly quick pilot studies. We expect that the funds get deployed within a year and the project actually finishes it within a year. There could be case by case things where it may justify going beyond that. And it could be case by case where some of the research at the AITCs may actually do follow on funding. But the purposes of this grant is 1 year. These could have the sizes of these studies. It could be 50, 100 subjects, basically. So these are relatively small. Obviously, the more that you can do where it is, statistically significant, the better. But these are relatively small, fairly quick I guess, relatively inexpensive projects because we're kind of in this, these are pilots, right? We want to see what flies.
So, is there anything else that we didn't discuss and you think people applying, whether they're entrepreneurs or researchers, should know?
I think academic researchers will be, probably a good portion of our applicants and awardees, but really more the message is, I think, to non-academics, which we're really trying to reach out to. They're also an important group. I think you're going to link the webinar that we had. Yeah, please definitely, watch that webinar and what the PIs of the respective collaboratories are looking for. But the one area that I get a lot of questions on is, or I encourage, is that when it actually goes to the application, I think scientific merit is a big portion. They are scientists, first and foremost. And so this is not necessarily for product development of your application, right? So you have to put it in, you have to contextualize it in what are you contributing to the aging and dementia research field? What are the existing research and how does this improve upon it? I guess important area that is a score for the NIH on probably every NIH grant application I'm learning. So usually it helps to probably involve an academic to partner with on this. And I think it just in general, health tech and med tech requires that academic reference anyways, right?
Absolutely.
And I'm happy to try to answer any questions. We have a broad mandate. And so I would just encourage you to apply. The application is only a couple pages long. And I'm told that the research collaboratories will give light feedback on your application. Some of them are actually hosting office hours to discuss your application. And then we're having this every year. And so if you don't get it this time, improve your application for next time. We have years 3, 4, and 5. And if you get selected and run a pilot program with us, it will make you more competitive for the much larger funding of the NIA SBIR grants. So think of us as the farm system for the SBIR grants that give $1 million for research, and you can do clinical trials and all that good stuff. And so, I just encourage you to research what the AITCs have. I can tell you that every AITC collaboratory is slightly different on what they are focused on based upon, I would say, the backgrounds of the PIs as well as the resources. And so, for example, Johns Hopkins is out of the School of Medicine and Penn is out of the School of Nursing. Massachusetts has a focus on home and sensor technology. So, everybody's slightly different, that they all can do everything, I guess. They all have, all the resources, the wealth of resources, so any one of them would be phenomenal to partner with on your pilot project.
Sounds like a wonderful, wonderful program, Stephen. I want to thank you for joining me today. And I want to thank you for running this program too, because it sounds like it really bridges a gap in funding. Like you said, it could be a stepping stone for the larger SBIR grants that require more resources from the company to run a huge clinical trial. So I'm incredibly excited about this. It's great that it's a 5-year program. And like you said, people who don't get it this year can try again next year. And if there are any other questions, please go to the AI Collective's website, www.a2collective.ai. All the information you need is right there, including the webinar, which I will link to in the show notes. And thank you for watching.
Thank you for your time and allowing me to share this with your community. And thank you for what you do for this space as well, too.
Thank you, Stephen. I appreciate it.